I felt the lesson contained some very key features. There was clearly established rules and routines to ensure that the lesson started off at a brisk pace, it was organised, it was orderly, and these are all examples of teaching over time that show secure kind of levels of understanding of the particular students. I think there were high levels of engagement at the outset because the work appeared to be matched effectively to the needs of the students. I was not as clear about the effectiveness of the deployment of the teaching assistant. At the start of the lesson, too much time standing around and not really seeing the impact or the deployment or the effectiveness of that. Because there were a variety of different activities, the students' interest was maintained throughout most of the lesson. They were making progress in their understanding of recognising the nets, and whilst that was clear, it was not as clear to see exactly what gains in knowledge and understanding and skills they'd actually made so far into the lesson. Students' understanding was enhanced significantly by the teacher's modelling and effective use of the visualiser. The first 25 minutes of the lesson really were just too teacher-directed, it was too teacher-led, too much teacher talk, and this did slow the pace of learning a little bit. And this was actually impacting on slowing the learning that was taking place. I felt that the starter went on too long, and it actually went on longer than the teacher had planned it to, and this also slowed the pace of learning. The students were ready to move on to the main task earlier than the teacher actually allowed them to. The behaviour for learning, whilst clearly the students were actually engaged by the activity, they were generally passive, and they were spending too much time just receiving information from the teacher rather than being actively involved in their own learning. Too much time just sitting and listening. The cutting out activity that they did really began to lose focus, and the issue with that was that the pupils were concentrating more on the intricacy of the actual task rather than on the mathematical point that they were trying to make. The role of the teaching assistant again became variable throughout the lesson, but there were some good examples of seeing the teaching assistant actually interacting with students and pushing them and questioning. The only danger there was a little element of spoon feeding with that and just giving them the answers a bit too soon. However, special educational needs pupils and the one pupil in particular did make expected progress because of the targeted support from the teaching assistant. What was clear from the evaluations of the observer and the questions that the observer was asking and the samples of the work that we could see was that marking was not as effective as it could be in ensuring that the students knew exactly what to do to improve. Few of them knew their targets, and the marking really wasn't actually tailored to the needs of the individual. It was a bit too generic. The assessment to support learning then was not as effective as it could have been. The teacher asked questions but didn't always allow sufficient time for the pupils to answer them, and occasionally just cut across the students as they answered. One of the other areas that we look for in lessons is the evidence of spiritual, moral, social and cultural, and there was very little evidence of that in this lesson, a couple of missed opportunities, but no real hard evidence to judge that. In evaluation, I would say that the strengths of the lesson, most pupils, including those with special educational needs, were making progress that was broadly in line with expectations. And that was because of the appropriate range of activities that the teacher provided, the clear learning objectives and the additional support from facilitating roles, walking around from group to group, and also the support from the teaching assistant. The teacher was effective in encouraging most, but not all, students to make progress throughout the lesson. Areas that were not as strong, I feel, were that it was not the progress was not really better than satisfactory because the tasks were not differentiated enough to the needs of the individual students. For example, lower attaining pupils, they found aspects of it that were slightly difficult and they were not enthused or motivated by the activity. Communication skills such as reading, writing were not developed deliberately throughout the lesson, although there was some key vocabulary and good use of that at times. Behaviour for learning was generally too passive. Because there was too much teacher talk and some aspects of the lesson were a bit on the slow side. So in summary, the grades I would give for this lesson are that achievement I felt was satisfactory, I felt the quality of teaching was satisfactory, and I felt that the behaviour of students throughout the lesson was also satisfactory. I think the Observer asked some very appropriate questions and made sure that it was clear about the targets that the students were working to and also the levels that they were currently at. And it also showed that the students themselves were not as clear as they could be about exactly what they needed to do to improve their work. So from that sense of it, I thought that was very valuable. Also looking at the quality of the work and the marking was really helpful to actually decide how much progress was being made over time with these students. So what I would have liked, had I been in the room doing it myself, is I'd have talked more to the students about how this lesson fitted into the overall picture of their learning journey throughout their time in school.